Morning. Thanks everyone for coming. This is one of the culminating events for Archives Awareness Week here in Tampa this summer. As you know, it's quite hot outside. Thanks so much for joining us. We're here today for a number of different reasons. So we're going to cover those as we go forward. There's a couple different photograph collections I think we're going to be giving a lot of love to today. And the first of those is the Burgert Brothers collection, which is probably most well known because of the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library. They have a really big chunk of that collection that's been offered online. And what's really amazing about it is it's a collection that fell out of copyright, which means that it's available for everyone to use. It's a public resource that people, if you have a bank, you can make your own calendar and sell that calendar or give it away or whatever and not have to worry about copyrights and all that stuff. So for that reason, the Burgert Brothers have helped establish kind of a visual language for the city of Tampa and the history around here. When you think of Florida postcards, you think of citrus labels and things like that, and commercial photography have all kind of established this visual language for Florida, a way that we remember Florida, and that's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, but there's a lot of things that are kind of missing from that record as well. We're here mainly to appreciate and to extol the virtues of these photographs today. So the Burgert Brothers, is well known to everyone. They're kind of black and white sepia tone photographs are really a backbone for the way that we remember and celebrate Tampa's history. So we have someone here from the Tampa Hillsborough County Library System. She works in the history and genealogy area, and her name is Abby Wonderly. Please come up and join us.
Hi everyone, my name's Abby Wonderly. I work with the Florida History and Genealogy floor. It's at the downtown library, the John F. Germany Library, 4th floor. So we have a quite large collection, one of the largest collections in the Southeast, heavily used every day, and we love to help people on the floor with any general questions. We have how-to books for genealogy, how to get started. We have areas on international aspects of genealogy. We have parts on different areas of the United States, of course, highlighting Florida, Hillsborough County. But we have a whole bunch of different areas to help you get started and continue with your research. We have a section of Florida history on all aspects, as much as we can, for the history of Florida and the Tampa Bay area, looking at restaurants or neighborhoods, sports, previous governors, anything like that. We try really hard to capture that aspect. And our Burgert Brothers collection is held there. The collection is online to browse, but we also have prints that you can also come to see. Chip's come to see us a whole lot, see them a lot. And we have a way for you to see them yourself, scan them if you want, request scans if you want. It's a heavily used thing, a beautiful way to capture the history of the area. And we also have other scanners too to help preserve in the aspect of Archives Awareness Week for trying to preserve any random photos you find or documents you're trying to keep for your research. We have things to help you with that, and our staff are more than happy to help you out. So all the resources will be available to you right downtown, and we'd love to help.
Oh, and I was remiss in not introducing myself. I'm Andy Hughes. I work over at the University of South Florida Libraries and Special Collections. I'm the curator of Florida Studies there. And I met Skip Gandy in 2011 when he brought the collection over. Skip's was a very low-key kind of guy, but his work I think it speaks for itself. I think he would probably, I don't know if he'd even want to be here today. I think he'd be a little embarrassed at all the attention, but I think it's really well deserved. So next I want to introduce kind of the person besides Skip who made all this, is making all this happen, and that's Chip Weiner. For those of you who don't already know him and his work, he's a mental health counselor by day, but then the rest of the time he's a sort of a Renaissance man, but photography is kind of his main thrust. And besides kind of getting completely immersed in the Burgert Brothers collection during the pandemic, I think we all had things we had to kind of hang on to during the pandemic. He started to retake all these photographs in painstaking fashion, all these old Burgerts. And once he ran out of that, he started to come to me for a new fix and was asking for, what kind of collections, what kind of photographs do you have for me to look at? And we've got a lot of great stuff in special collections. But this one was one that was really unknown. And I was like, oh, you're gonna have fun with this. We've got about 80,000 negatives. They're little negatives right now, so they're not so easy to view. But soon, hopefully very soon, we're gonna have them all up online. And what's really amazing about it is that I spoke to Skip Gandy's family, and they generously agreed to a Creative Commons license for all of these photographs. So that means that everything that goes up online will be like the Burgert Brothers. It will be totally usable. It will be a public resource that's copyright free. And what's really interesting about Skip is that he took a lot of photographs that weren't necessarily on the books. He wasn't paid to take the photograph of the smokestacks at the power plant that upset him, or the oil spill in the Gulf. So there's all kinds of great stuff, and it's not just, say, purely commercial stuff. But so I don't want to go on too much longer, because this is really about Chip's journey, because Chip is the one who, once he saw these photographs, was like, oh, this has got to be like a thing. People have to know about this. So he sort of challenged us to raise some funds. So we're in the middle of that right now. And if you're interested, you can just Google Skip Gandy Photography. You can throw in Herd or Herd Funder, as in H-E-R-D, Herd of Bulls. We've got these postcards in the back. So you got the QR code on the back. It'll take you right to the link. So if you can help out, small amounts, big amounts, it all helps. What's amazing is that, you're not just investing in something, I don't know, for a new collection for a library, but this is going to really belong to everybody. It's going to be a free resource. So let's kind of pivot back to Chip. He's the one who kind of got this all started. He is a USF Bull from 1980. And he's been on this kind of journey ever since the pandemic set him on this new path of kind of retracing the steps of the Burgert Brothers. And Skip Gandy might be the next one. He may have to get a pilot's license to completely retrace all these steps. But without further ado, Chip Weiner to tell you about his journey from the Burgerts to the Gandy collection.
Oh my goodness. Look at all these people. How fantastic is that? That you would have such an interest in this collection and in Tampa history. And I'm just so proud to be able to bring this collection to you and to have this many people interested in it. And I think this is just a small core of the folks who appreciate Tampa history. As Andy was saying, I've been at this for about since early 2020. In my photography career, back then I was working a project. I shot for Creative Loving newspaper for a dozen years or so and met a bunch of really, really cool people. And what I was doing at that point was I was going around and taking portraits of folks that I had met over those years in their environment. So, artists in their studios and things like that. And then the pandemic hit, which sort of shut that down. And I got to do something with all that creative juice. I got to have something to sort of focus on. And all of a sudden, I'd known about the Burgert collection, but I didn't really spend a lot of time looking through it. And then I got the juice. I started looking through it, and I think part of it was I've been in Tampa since early 60s, and this is what downtown Tampa looked like when I first got here. And I'm like, gosh, I remember that. I wonder what it looks like now. And so what did I do? I packed up my camera and I went behind Tampa General, and I saw this. I'm like, oh my gosh, that is really, really cool. And that's really where it sort of started. As I went through more of the collection, I was able to see things that I remembered from my youth. And I could go around town and I could see these buildings. And the truth of the matter is, I was doing a radio show last week with Mario Nunez and John Dingfelder, Down and Dirty, 10 o'clock on Friday morning on WMNF. Let me give them a little plug. And Mario asked me, he said, why do you think that people like having that, that memory, being able to look at those images? And I'd ask myself the same thing, because I'm telling you, my wife is here, God bless her. I was obsessed. I still am. So, I'd finish my day job and then I'm on the computer and she's, honey, it's time. Okay, all right, good. So thank her. She's what got me here. But the bottom line is, I wonder, what is it that gets me going and gets people going? Look around this room of the folks who showed up for this and who have an interest in it. And so I put on my mental health hat and started just kind of looking at this. And I think there's a function in our brain that likes nostalgia, especially as we get older. We attach emotions to images. What I liken it to is, there's a lot of study recently about trauma. And what they're talking about with trauma is when something happens to us, our eyes take a little video or a little snapshot of that incident. And we attach a feeling to it, and it is then sort of stored in the amygdala, in sort of the core of our brain. And over time, sometimes we're able to tuck that away, kind of compartmentalize it, but then we see something that triggers it. And not only does that image come up again, but so does the emotion. And that's a very negative experience for most people. But I think the positive part of that mechanism, whether it's in the amygdala or whatever, I think that it's built into us as human beings to have that and to want to reminisce and to look back and to feel those feelings again. And it's not just with photography. Think of that song. When you hear that song, it takes you back to that place where you first heard it, or that joyful occasion. Think of that smell, those cookies, the holidays, which just puts us right back. And it's that sort of thing. It's that nostalgia. And by the way, advertisers are all over this. You watch those commercials on TV, especially during the holidays, they're taking us back because we have that mechanism. What's one of the hottest movies right now? Anyone? Barbie. I never had a Barbie doll, but my goodness, there are a lot of people that did. And so they're really, really using that. And I think that's the mechanism. I think that's what takes us back. And that's really what kind of got me going, is I was able to look back and see and consider really where I was in my life at that time. And so that's part of what got me going with all of this. If you're going to think about looking into some of these collections, such as the Burgert Brothers, and Gandy once it's online, there's so much that you can do with it, so much. If you want to do research, I'm going to show you some images, you can do that. If you want to get nostalgic, go online, just put in your birth year in the Burgert collection and see what comes up, or a couple of years thereafter, and see what was happening in Tampa or around Florida at that time, because it was a lot, and it can sort of show you what was happening with that. So what happened with me rephotographing all of this is I started, and I'm like, wow, that's really fun. Let me look at a couple of these other ones, and I looked, and I took my digital camera and a film camera, a big old film camera with me, and started shooting it, and I'm like, this is a cool project. So I contacted a couple of photo editors, sent them images of the original Burgert shot, of my film photograph, and of the color. And I said, which one of these represents the old and the new? And unanimously they said the color photograph, the digital photograph, because that's today, represents today, and then you've got the Burgert going on. So I was able to, I moved forward with that. I still use my film camera a lot, but those were the three images, if I can get back to it. That's the original downtown Tampa, that's my color, and that's what it looks like on film, but nonetheless, that's sort of how this project started, and the book went from there. So I went on to try to emulate exactly what the Burgerts did, exactly how they did it. I got an app on my phone that tells me where the sun's going to be at a certain part of the day. I know when the front of the building is lit. I can see the angles that they stood and try to replicate that not only with where I'm standing, but also with a camera lens, because different lenses shoot things different ways. And how could I replicate some of that? So as I looked through some of this, this was how the Burgerts took many of their photographs for a couple of reasons. Number one, when you're up high, you don't get what's called distortion when you're shooting a photograph. If you can shoot it straight on instead of shooting up at it, you get these nice parallel lines. And their cameras did that as well. And so they were able to stand on their trucks, as well as there used to be a whole lot more parking spaces around Tampa. And what they would do is they would pull into a parking space, even on what was Lafayette, now Kennedy. There was parking spaces there. They could pull in and they could shoot across the street without having to deal with traffic and other things that might get in their way. So that's the way that they did it. Another collection was Robertson and Fresh. And there are many of these images at in the USF Digital Collection, and this is how they did it as well. They were friendly competitors to the Burgerts, but some fantastic photos that came from Robertson and Fresh. And so what did I do? Get up there, baby. I wanted to see it the way they saw it and shoot it the way that they shot it. So I put a palette on top of my Honda Element and went around and shot. And as you can see, I was kind of replicating it, but we don't have the parking spaces that we used to. I don't have the ability to take a ladder, so I tried to work harder instead of smarter, and I put together this rig. And what I was able to do was I could raise my camera up very high, I could see the old Burgert image here, and I could control my camera and see what my camera was seeing with my phone. And so that's how I did some of this shooting. And here's what I looked like. People are coming by, what are you doing? But you know, again, being out on the street, I got to talk about, do you know about the Burgerts? Do you know about the collection? It was really cool. Then I finally got smart and I said, let me put it on my bicycle. Now I can go everywhere. I can zig and zag and I can get around town, and I've got this tall pole that goes on my bicycle and I can do it that way. So that was sort of the beginning. This is the Burgert family tree. I won't bore you with a lot of it, but the bottom line is, if you see where Samuel is, he was really the dad that started the business, and these were the brothers and their families. And all 5 brothers worked in the Burgert collection or for the Burgert photography at some point. They were all involved. Some of them left, some of them stayed, and if you see Fell down here at the bottom, he's going to be a key figure in how this whole thing came about, as you'll see on this next slide. So this is sort of an interesting timeline related to the Burgerts. Samuel and Will, which was his oldest son, opened a portrait studio on 7th Avenue. I'll show you a photo of that in a second. Let's see if I've got it. There they are. That's the portrait studio on 7th. It was brilliant because it had those windows out front that faced north, which means light is good all the time. In 1917, Al and Jean, 2 of the sons, buy a commercial photography business. William Fishbaugh had a photography business. Some of his images are included in the Burgert archive. That's what started the commercial part of the Burgerts. So they had a portrait studio in Ybor City, and then in 1917, the 2 brothers got together and started this commercial venture, which really brought us many of the awesome photos that we see now. And I'll let you read the rest of this. There's some comings and goings. You see in 1942, Al sold his business to Thel, and employee Al Severinson, who had been in and out of the firm several times, but he eventually bought into it, and they continued to photograph. And in the 1950s, as you can see, he sold 800 images to historian Tony Pizzo. I know some of the people in this room know that name. Talk about Tampa history in the flesh. That guy was awesome. I would love to have met him, but he did a lot of collecting. He has a lot of their images. And so, as Severinson's probably trying to capitalize on this collection, which no one really made a big deal out of. They're just photos. He tried to sell some of those. In '63, he decided to retire, sold the collection to Carlton Trimble, who was a photo dealer. And as fate would have it, in 1966, Mr. Trimble was arrested and convicted for selling pornography. I'll just leave that part alone, but the bottom line is then he was no longer in business and had to sell the collection. Along comes Henry Cox, who owned Tampa Photo Supply, which the Burgert started back in the early 1900s, but it had many owners since then. And Henry Cox came along and said, that collection has got some value. And they went and found it, and it was in his garage, Trimble's garage in South Tampa, in Palma Seca, in a garage in file cabinets. 20, 30, 40,000 images and negatives in these file cabinets, just rotting away. So Cox understood the value of that, and he purchased the collection. I don't know for how much. It was never disclosed, but I'm assuming it wasn't for very much, because Trimble was kind of in trouble. From there, Cox sold some of them, I think an unspecified number, to Hampton Dunn, another huge name, not only in the newspaper business, but also in Tampa history, and I'm sure you've probably heard his name before. Big guy. He's written a few books related to Tampa history, and Cox sold some images to him. And eventually Cox decided, well, I need to do something with these. He couldn't handle the entire collection, so he approached the state of Florida for the archives for the state of Florida. And the state said, we'd love to have them. We don't have 10 grand, because that's who he was asking for them. We don't have it. So he then, I don't know all the machinations, but he then approached the people at the Hillsborough County Library, said, listen, I'd like for you to have these for $10,000. The library said, dude, I don't know what you've been smoking, but we don't have that kind of money. And eventually he turned out selling it to the library for $2,000 with the stipulation that they would be made public. That is how we are now able to use the Burgert collection as the public and have all of this beautiful visual history of Tampa, because the Hillsborough County Library has ingested those. And Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're almost finished with the digitizing those. Getting there?
Yes.
I mean, this has been a 30-year process, but that's a lot of photos. All available online to you, and as Abby said, also available if you want to go to the library and see those there. It's from the late 1800s to 1960, there's a visual history of Tampa, and all of Florida, really. And some absolutely cool images that I'm going to show you here in a few minutes, but that's the story of the Burgerts. There they are. This is in Plant Park, by the way. That statue is still down there somewhere. That's their original studio. This is what it looks like now. It was a 3-story building. It is now a 1-story building. I went and talked to the guy. I said, what happened with that? He said there was a catastrophic fire. They never rebuilt it. So that's what it looks like now. One of the challenges in doing some of this work is I would look at this, I'm like, that does not look familiar to me. And clearly it wasn't, because it was a 3-story building. And as I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, that little part right there in that building looks familiar to me. And so I get on Google Maps and drive down 7th Avenue, and sure enough, guess what I see but that little feature in the building. And that's how I was able to figure out where it was, because in some of the archives, the address is incorrect. That's how I was able to find that. What a cool shot is this. This, I think, was in 1915, but as I said, part of the archive is from Fishbaugh. And this is just one of his shots. This is some of the stuff that the Burgerts brought. We were just wrapping up on World War I. This is in Tampa Harbor, or Tampa Port. Just what a dynamic shot. You got these submarines, you got the smoke, you got the people. So cool. This is what their cameras looked like, at least initially, and through pretty much the middle of the century. Several different, these are large format cameras, and that one in the middle, the low one in the middle, is what's called a circuit camera. And if you go and see the collection, and I strongly encourage you to go and look at them, there are these 5 feet wide photos. They're about this tall, but they're super wide. And the way that camera worked is it would have a piece of film in it, and they'd open the shutter, and it would mechanically just sweep. And as it swept, it would pull more negative behind it, and would take this beautiful photo of what was happening in the scene. So they had the best equipment. They had the best techniques. They were fantastic photographers, which is what brought us this beautiful collection, and that's part of what their cameras looked like. As they moved on, I'm sure they changed cameras, and there's some evidence of that, which I'll talk about in a second. This is what the library page looks like. It's not a great rendition, but as you can see, when you open it up in the Burgert collection, that's Al Burgert. He had the first car on Davis Island, so that's him there. And you can see that it's sort of categorized, just some of them, African Americans, bungalows, cigar industry, Gasparilla, and those are just some of the headings. As you get into the collection, you'll see over on the left of the page a whole lot of keywords and things. You can tap one of those, you can tap on a date. So it's really, really well organized in the collection, and I just strongly encourage you to go and take a look at it because it's pretty fabulous. Part of my interest in it was not just replicating, but also some of the history. And that is, if you look at those books, available in the Tampa History Center bookstore, if you look at some of those, they all tell some story about it. And as I was doing the history on these images, it just occurred to me, you've heard that saying that every picture tells a story. I switched it into every picture has a story. And as I do the research and as I look into some of this fabulous stuff that we've had, this is not only with the Burgerts, but also with Skip Gandy stuff, there's history that we have forgotten. There are stories in Tampa that are just so relevant even today, even to just help us remember and to know history. And this was one of them, just one of the 20,000. This was Cliff Mathis's place. It was in Ybor City. It was on the other side of the tracks. Those are the tracks. And what's relevant about this is there are a couple of African American women standing there, but if you look at that sign, maybe you will or won't, it says colored only upstairs. I didn't see a lot of evidence of this in the Burgert collection, but that's like, wow. You know, when you're talking about Jim Crow era photographs and what Tampa was going through and how we have grown and how things have changed, it's a good example. What's there now? Parking garage. Pretty cool, but now it's a parking garage. And you know, it's just another piece of the history. This is another just super dynamic photo. I found this more recently. This is at Tampa Union Station, which is still a working station. They just had their celebration a couple of months ago. And it is a line of African American men. This was in 1933, right in the middle of the Great Depression. And what was happening then was people were out of work. They couldn't make money. And so the government started a program of allowing people to go and work in the forest preservation program. From what I understand, the conditions were terrible. But what I'm able to do when I have some of these high-resolution images is I call it pixel peeping. I can look in and see really, really close some of the stuff that's going on. And while you can see some of the faces of these gentlemen as they're standing in line, what's hard to see, white waiting room. And, you know, again, it's just sort of a testament. It's not I don't want to get political about it. It's just visual history of what Tampa experienced over our years. Cool shot down 7th Avenue. Here's some men over here probably just finishing up lunch, standing outside of this restaurant finishing up lunch, but there's this one cool lady right here standing with an umbrella. I don't know what all the American flags are. I'm assuming maybe this was after the 4th of July celebration. Some of you may recognize this. That is the First Baptist Church on what is now Kennedy Boulevard. But this hotel used to be right across the street from Plant Park. And streetcars and automobiles, as you can see. And just so that we don't feel like we're left alone, we're still doing this, wrenching on cars when they break down on the side of the road. This is what pixel peeping gets you as well. You get to sort of see people living their lives on a day-to-day basis. It also provides us with sort of this linear history, and I think that's one of the beauties of having a Skip's collection, is that we start with the Gandys, we can see a building, and sometimes the Burgert show us the next building, and sometimes then Skip's collection shows us the next. So it's in the 20s and the 30s and then maybe in the 60s. And so we have this nice linear history. This was McCrory's. Another very interesting photo. This is the same building. You see the Tampa Theater is there, but this part, if it will let me. Helen Martin, girl in iron lung on a bus outside of Walgreens. I mean, she was touring the country. Polio was a thing, and so iron lung was this miraculous invention that they came up with to save lives. But what a, again, such a historical photo, and here's what it is today. Home of Tampa's strongest pour, the Hub Bar, man. Cheapest and strongest, there it is. It's that kind of thing that we get to see what was there and we get to experience some of that. Some of you may have lived in Hyde Park. Tons of photos of homes in Hyde Park. Bungalows. It's still there. We get to look back and see this was the Sapphire Room at the Floridan Hotel, dancing and having fun. By the way, they have just rehabbed that, and they have a new restaurant there called The Dan. And you show this to a teenager today, okay, what's that kid doing? Why is he throwing stuff around the neighborhood? But it's back in the 50s, and we're looking at really life on life's terms with images like that. This is an embalming room at a funeral home. While it may seem a little morose, it still gives us this look back into medical history. We can see the tools that they used and the equipment that was there. And this one as well, I think this is on Florida Avenue. And the reason I think it's historic is if you look at it, there's a Cadillac for $1,200. Friendly Motors, it's still there, but I think now it's a body shop or something. Another one. And this is where I get kind of challenged or I also get sort of juiced is I find a photo like this, I'm like, what the heck is that? And it's just titled, Woman Wearing Goggles and Welding a Piece of Metal. And that's not all right with Uncle Chip. I got to know what's going on with that. So I got the high-res photo and I was able to zoom in to her nameplate. Turns out that she is a champion welder. She was working in the shipbuilding industry at Port Tampa right around World War II. And so, we have our own Rosie the Riveter, but why wasn't her name put out there? And why don't we know more about her history? And we're able to find that now by looking at some of these images. And I mean, that's just a cool shot. That's just a cool shot. And then to go and look at the history and understand how Tampa impacted World War II with its shipbuilding, because there were some massive ships we built here and the people that participated in that. The collection has things like this back in the 1920s with the land boom, 24 and 25. Man, people were bringing some money to Tampa. Let's invest in Davis Island. Let's invest in all these subdivisions. And by the way, let's open this place called Tampa Beach, which was kind of where Apollo Beach is now. And there it is. The causeway had just been built. They're like, man, we got a perfect pathway from downtown to Tampa Beach. Let's make it happen. Millions of dollars, beautiful building in downtown Tampa, millions of dollars poured in, 1926, 27 comes around, see you later. That money disappeared because land bust. This was a planned hotel and shopping experience in downtown Tampa. Look at the size of that thing. Architectural drawing of what was going to come to Tampa. This is the block that it was going to take up. Supposed to, yeah. It never came to fruition. Again, land boom, land bust. Lots of money, lots of drawings, but didn't come to fruition. But that also speaks to Tampa's history. Because in the 20s, man, we were rocking. People were coming down on Henry Plant's train, and I mean, we were just kicking it. Lots of money flowing in. Then hurricane and the Great Depression kicks in, and we begin to lose it. As the Burgerts progressed, and Skip or the Gandy family came around, they had to sort of compete. This is one of the Burgert Brothers. I think this is in 1950s. They went into aerial photography. This is very similar to what the Gandys were promoting. And so they were trying to keep up. I guess they were probably friendly competitors. But one of the cool things about the Gandy collection, which we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes, is this nice transition, this nice visual transition from where we were in the middle of the century into the end. And that's what they look like. So last little bit of commentary. This was a Burgert photo of the same block that I think this was a Sandy Gandy photo. His dad Same block, same building. You can see that the signage isn't there, so there's probably about 10 years apart. But again, nice visual history, and the Exchange Bank is there now, that tall tower. And I put this last one in here. This was taken in late 1960s, long after the Burgerts were not involved anymore, and I think even after Severinsen wasn't involved anymore. This was shot with a 35 millimeter camera. It's in the collection. I'm not sure who took it. I don't know, because the collection had really been sold by then, but it still speaks to the breadth of this collection. So really the best way in Chip's world anyway to experience is to go online and look. Just type in some subjects to search and take a look through some of that collection, because it's pretty dang fabulous. Okay. As Andy mentioned a few minutes ago, I got these books, and I'm just really pumped up on it. I think it was in 2021. I'm trying to come around and figure out how I'm going to publish them, because I already put out a small book, the paperback back there, and all of a sudden, I've got 950 pages worth of photographs to publish. And so Andy was kind enough, I went in and talked with him, because this dude's written some books, Tampa history-wise, on restaurants, on food, on some of the underworld as well. And so please feel free to talk with him about that. And the USF folks are just so gracious. They allowed me to come in and talk with them. And again, Andy helped me out some. And as he said, I'm looking through some of Hampton Dunn's collection. I'm looking through Tony Pizzo's collection. I said, okay, this is cool. What else you got? And then he mentioned Skip Gandy. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I got to meet Skip actually one time, because as I was getting into photography, I was working for a motorcycle magazine. I was doing a fashion shoot. This was sort of the beauty and the beast. You know, I love juxtaposition in photography, where you get this hard metal and you know, a good-looking person in it. And so I talked with Skip, because I knew he had an airplane, and Peter Knight Airport was a great place to shoot. And he said, yeah, come on out. So that's his plane in the background. That's an antique motorcycle, as you can see, and that was sort of my intro to Skip. And as I learned more and more about him, by the way, you can go online and see an interview with him, oral history through the USF collection. He's this gruff guy, but I think he was just as soft-hearted as they come, but he just had this exterior of but what a cool cat. That was my first kind of exposure to Skip. And so I started looking through and doing some research. Gandy name is probably familiar to you, because some of you drive to St. Petersburg. His great-grandfather built the Gandy Bridge and the St. Pete Yacht Club. His entire family was really into water and outdoors and so on, but his great-grandfather, who is pictured over there, built the bridge. This is his grandfather, who's named Gidge Gandy. That's his father, Sandy Gandy, who really sort of started the photography business, and then they used to call him Skipper Gandy. And that's sort of how I began to understand where he came from and really what it was made of. They grew up on Davis Island, and this was Skip's home. I've got a photo of it, I think, somewhere. They grew up across Seddon Channel from the phosphate pits. This was a ship getting loaded right across Channel Drive on Davis Island. That's what it looked like. That's what it looks like now. It is now Harbor Island, but back when Skip lived there, these ships would get loaded, creating clouds of dust, and being right across the harbor. This is what his car looked like. This was his dad's car. His dad shot for the Tampa Tribune and Tampa Times and shot this photo, but Skip wrote on the car. And as we look at his collection, we also understand that he was really into the environment. He took a lot of shots related to that, and I'm wondering if this didn't start it, because he experienced this every day. And I grew up on Davis Island, and I know some of the smells that used to come across that island. And I mean, you could feel it, you could taste it. As you're eating, you would taste some of that phosphate. At night, if you threw a rock into the water, it glowed. because it was phosphorescent water that made it happen. So Skip grew up over there, and I think began to develop not only ideas related to the environment, but also paid strong attention to his dad. And so as far as Sandy Gandy is concerned, the dad, some of his images, by the way, are in the Gandy collection. Some of the early images, some of which you'll see today, were shot by his dad. His dad was a 36-year photographer. He majored in aeronautic engineering at Carnegie Tech. He didn't do anything with that. He came back and in 1938 was a photographer for the St. Pete Times. In 1943, he became chief photographer for the Tampa Times. And in 1957, 1958, he was a cameraman for WTVT. And later, in 1959, he started his own photography business, which Skip later joined. And so Sandy died in 1974, really right as Skip was getting involved. Gidge Gandy, by the way, died in 1973. So a couple of quick losses in Skip's life, but he persevered. Skip was born in 1942 and grew up on Davis Island, as I said. In 1957, let me show you some of this because I just think it's cool. This was his house, by the way, on Davis Island, right on Channel Drive over there. And as you might guess, this is what it looks like now. Another mansion goes up. So again, he had several awards in 1957. He won the Florida Science Fair. 1959 took top prize for a Hillsborough Science Fair as well. In 1960, he went to Emory University and got a bachelor's in economics. Smart guys, really super smart. In 1964, he joined the Coast Guard. And again, he was on a boat. He was out in the water, so joining the Coast Guard makes sense to me. And when he came back, he joined his dad's firm, and I believe that was in 1970. And as Andy said a few minutes ago, he donated his collection in 2011, 2012 to USF. And I just like been there when they received it, because I'll show you pictures, boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of negatives. Just this huge collection. And how we are so blessed to be able to have that collection for us to look at. And what a gift Skip, his father, and now his family, who allow this digital commons license for us all to enjoy. We can all go online and see these images, and that's what a cool gift. Skip passed away in 2020, so he never really got to understand the breadth and how his collection would impact us. But as I started putting some of these images online, and some of you have seen them, people are all over it. I knew Skip. I dated him. I lived next door to him. They're talking about his personality. I bought a lens from him, and I just kind of get to have this feeling of what this guy was about. And from what I understand from his family, he was just this very giving guy. I asked Andy, hey, is it possible we can get one of his cameras to bring in, to show the collection? He gave all his stuff away. Gave it away! And that's, kind of give you some insight as far as what Skip was all about from a personality standpoint. This is the collection at USF. Boxes and boxes and boxes. This is what it looks like in the collection, envelope after envelope after envelope. And one of the challenges of the collection is not many of these things are dated. So knowing, doing some pixel peeping, looking at dates and things, sometimes that you can see in the negative will identify it. And certainly some of the subjects help us identify it, but boxes upon boxes, and this is what it looks like. But as you're thumbing through and you come across something like this, what? Alessi? That name's familiar. Talk about some Tampa history, and so dig in. That is the kind of thing that I have found in that collection. This is what it looks like in the envelope. Sometimes there's several negatives stuffed in one envelope. Sometimes there's a proof there with the negative. Sometimes there's a larger proof. This is what the envelope looks like, sometimes with some description. This is what is inside of it, just a large negative. This is the problem. This is why we need to do this now. This is a negative in the collection, and as you can see, it's going away. That should be flat and shiny, and it's just degrading. That's what happens with old negatives. And that's part of why I said, no, boy, we got to do something. We're not going to let this history disappear. It's too good. Negatives are supposed to be flat. Not all of them are. And so to get this stuff done, I found a technique that I could kind of use, but as we're looking at digitizing these, there's a company that specializes in this, and that's what they're going to be doing with this collection. I was going to take some time to show you some of his equipment. I'm going to just sort of really jet through this. As you see this notch over here, what that tells me is that's a press camera, the things that they used to use back in the day. And you had 2 shots. It had a thing that held film on the back of it. You take a shot, flip it over, take another shot, and then, unless you change that film holder out, you're done. So you get 2 shots out of one film holder, but that's the majority of it. And a lot of that was Sandy's stuff. This is what the camera looked like. At least I suspected this is what the camera looked like. And I'm like, man, is that really it? Here's another shot of it. And then beautifully, I'm looking through, and this is Hampton Dunn and Sandy Gandy, and there's the camera. So I was able to verify that indeed they used old press cameras back in the day. As I moved on, I saw this beautiful shot. You remember this little bug helicopter used to fly over Tampa? Tampa Stadium before it had end zones. Al Lopez Field, but it's square. I'm like, nope. A press camera didn't take that. That's a Hasselblad, because that's the format that Hasselblad uses. So now I'm out trying to figure out what was that all about, and I came across this in the collection, shot with a press camera. This is a picture of a Hasselblad, and I still didn't know, is this a product shot that they took, or is this the one that they were using? And then I came upon this that was shot with a Hasselblad, and I said, I wonder. I see you. Reflection, I'm going to assume, of Sandy Gandy holding it up to his eye. Hasselblads, for the most part, you look down through it. There's one Hasselblad camera that you look through a viewfinder on the camera. That was it. So again, for the gearheads in the room, that's some of the equipment that he used. The reason, again, for that camera, it's used by cartographers, and this is the one that went on the moon mission. And then I started seeing these. This is film, long film, but it's not square anymore, and I started wondering what camera they were using. This is another reason to get this collection done now. This is a color photograph, but it didn't look like this when he took it. The color is beginning to degrade. So I wonder what camera they were using. This is a beautiful shot Skip took in front of his place on Davis Island. And guess what I see but those beautiful medium format cameras with a wooden handle on it. And there's only one. It's a Pentax 67. I don't want to bore you guys with it, but again, Skip left us all these clues about what he was doing and how he did it. So cool shot of that. And this is what the camera looked like. That's his thing. And this was an advertisement from Skip. Some point they went to 35 millimeter. I want to say that he probably started with high end, but I was talking with someone last night. He ended up shooting with an Olympus, and here it is. But 35 millimeter are a lot smaller, and they also shot slides. And this was 35 millimeter. One of the concerns, at least from the people in the collection, are these little slides, are they really going to be worth it to replicate and to turn into prints? And so I took one in high res, man, they look great. The density in old slide film is really, really nice as long as it's done. Again, Tampa Stadium. So yeah. Isn't that a beautiful shot? And the old TB hospitals there in the background, for those of you that remember that before HCC went in. So let's get to the juice. Let's talk about what's actually in the Gandy collection. As I said, environmentalist, he was challenged by what he saw from the sky. This is Crystal River nuclear plant. And again, he's just flying around up there and trying to document what he saw. Early environmentalist, and he goes around taking photos of some of the things that were challenging to him. Pollution, mining, look at that water. Pollution from a rig off the coast of Florida. He documented all these, and by the way, these are all high res at some point. Tico plant. Look at that pollution. one of the cool things, if you want to call it that, is that you know who one of Skip's first customers and biggest customers was? Tampa Electric. They commissioned him to do a lot of photos of people as well as of sites because, as Andy was saying earlier, if you're going to build somewhere, you got to have an aerial. And so there was this sort of back and forth, I guess, probably between Skip and Tico. They had to have him, and he kind of liked having their money. But Andy tells me, and I saw it in the oral history, that he would go up in his plane, he would take these environmental shots, and he in his studio at Davis Island, he had his wall of shame. And when he put photos of the environment up on the windows at his place on Davis Island and call it the wall of shame. And a lot of them came from Tico. But that was Skip. I'll work for you, but I'm still going to criticize you. And that's just part of the beauty of what he brought. So, and again, there's articles about how he was able to look at the bay's condition and talk about how it was terrible. And so as I'm looking through the collection, and this is where the juice is, I think, for everybody in this room. I'm looking through the collection, and I come across this naked, and I'm, man, that dude looks familiar. And I look closer and closer. That was my stepfather. That's with his former wife before he married my mother, and that's for a whole other archives week. But I went through and I found family members. I found fraternity brothers in this collection. I'm like, what the heck? And I hope when this is online, because it's not so well documented, that you will go through. He photographed businesses, Billy Bob's accounting firm. But he doesn't have the names of the people in there. So I think part of the benefit, if the USF collection can make this happen, and it's going to take some technology to make it happen, is the group think here, is the collective ideas. There was an image that we put online last week of this guy holding Cuban bread, old black and white, probably taken by Sandy Gandy. It's just this guy holding a bunch of loaves of Cuban bread, and someone found it online and put it on Facebook. Turns out that was the owner of Spanish Park Restaurant. Well, I didn't know that. Joe Valles. And so if we get those kinds of feedback, imagine the collective history that we can put online for future generations to have. That if you have a memory about this, if you have some knowledge, that you can participate in the collective history that Skip brought to us. So there's other bits and pieces. This is what it looks like. So this is affiliated of Florida, which was a company, but no one is labeled in it. Barnes & Associates. Some of the photography in his collection is a little difficult to look at. He worked for lawyers because he's a commercial photographer. The motorcycle magazine that I worked for was run by a lawyer. Guess what I got to shoot sometimes? People who were injured, because that's part of the deal in being a commercial photographer is you kind of go where people need you to go. And so some of the stuff is kind of difficult to look at, but nonetheless it speaks to the history and to the breadth of some of Skip's work. Any Davis Island people here, Davis Island Country Club, no longer there, but what a historic site. Lots of stuff on Davis Island. This was the hotel that was there, and back in the day, this was the, you better believe it, man, Davis Island Club. Berkeley Prep used to be a hotel. Davis Island Pharmacy. If you grew up on Davis Island, not only did you know this building, you had cherry Cokes there. And a honey bun is right. And I went in, the current owner's name is Bobby Bobo, and I said, listen, man, is it okay if I take some shots? He said, yeah, because there's a couple of the inside as well. And I shared that with him. And again, the guy just lights up. He attached to those photos. He's able to see what was there. Product shots, just old stuff. Who is it? In the flesh, man, on that telephone. Glad handing people back in the day. He's still doing it today. Hey, good to see you. Good to talk to you.
Chip, we own the painting at the back.
What about the painting?
We own that painting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
part of Mosher.
She owns the painting that was in the office. Look at this connection. How cool is that?
I saw it, by the way.
Okay. Call it. Bob Martinez and staff. Anyone know? Bill Poe. And this is Bill Poe with Frank Franklin, who was with Pioneer Tire. And the reason that this photo is relevant is because Gandy was shooting for Poe's re-election campaign. But what I also really kind of glommed onto was, as you're out on the street as a photojournalist and you learn stuff, you kind of make a note of it. And so what Skip did, this building, the whole thing was about tearing down this block out on Franklin. Skip had his ear to the ground, and when this building started to get torn down, he went and photographed that because he knew that it was part of the campaign and he knew what was coming. Thank you very much. I don't know where this photo came from, probably Sandy Gandy, but goodness gracious. There's also a photograph of an Elvis album in the collection. This is a Greco on his boat, so some personal stuff as well. One of the cool things that I'm able to do with today's technology, and I don't know if I have time to cover it today, is I can take a couple of Skip's photos and paste them together. So we got this whole block. And as I looked at Haber's, I'd heard the name. I was in downtown in the 60s, but I wasn't paying attention. But as I started doing the every picture tells a story, every picture has a story, and I looked into the Haber's, terrible things that happened, where Mr. Haber was murdered and his wife was convicted of it. And I mean, it took over town, the trial and all of that. On Davis Island, yeah, that's where, it's still there. And so it not only does it help us see downtown, but it helps us recall, it helps us there it is, this is the panoramic. Using today's technology, I'm able to put stuff together, something Skip was never necessarily able to do, but there's the entire block and what it looked like. And again, as I put this stuff online, it's kind of hard to hear, but it's important for us to remember some of the trials and tribulations that we've been through as a city. This is what it looks like now. This is downtown on Florida. So he took this, and then he took this. Today's technology gave us this, so we have this entire photo, this panoramic of what the 600 block of Florida looked like. And I won't zoom in, but I can tell you there's tons of businesses there. This is what it looks like now. Back in the day. I'm guessing late 60s, early 70s, looking at the cars, Tampa General. If you lived on Davis Island, you knew Bernie Little, and you knew that he used to run his Miss Budweiser hydroplane over in the channel because you could hear it and you could see it, and there's this whole story that goes with Bernie and his kids. His son, Joe, was one of my best friends back in the day. So I can relate to this as well as Tampa history, Tampa sports. Wrestling at Curtis Hickson Hall, there it is. I don't know who these wrestlers are, but big part of Tampa history. The Rowdies run here, the Rowdies run there. Kick the ball around. And we'll move towards wrapping up on this. As I'm going through it, all of a sudden I find this collection of photos in Ybor City. Super important stuff. And this photo is of today. See, this is what it used to be. And it was a beauty supply place. The reason why this is relevant, I hope you've heard the name Daryl Shaw. If you haven't, he's big money, and he's really doing great things in Ybor City, man. God bless him. He's bringing art and rebuilding it and really going to change the face, I think, of Ybor City. But the cool part about this photograph is this is the first building he ever purchased. And the story goes that after he purchased it, he and family were up on that second balcony watching the Gasparilla Night Parade one year. They celebrated, they went home. A week later, he gets a phone call. There's a problem. Your building just fell down. So that was Daryl Shaw's first venture into commercial real estate in Ybor City. But, he's back and he's going to make it so much better. But that sort of history goes with it as well. Here it is from the side, and here's what it looks like now. Tampa Bay Center, this is during construction, no longer with us, and this is what it looked like on the inside. If you don't remember the amusement park, Super Test Amusement at the corner of Columbus and Dale Mabry, big deal back in the 50s. You've seen this probably, one of my favorite shots. There were several from the Kennedy campaign. This was probably in the late 50s when Kennedy and Johnson were campaigning, but even better, man, I'm going through the collection and this shows up. Color photographs of President Kennedy here when he was here 5 days before he was assassinated. Color photographs. There's his helicopter. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant stuff. I mean, how cool. I want to wrap up on that. I hope you are juiced. I hope that you will participate in at least enjoying the Gandy collection, because it is going to be remarkable. 80,000 images. And I'm hoping, they don't listen to me a lot, but I'm hoping early 2024. It'll be online for everyone to enjoy. That's sort of my hope. I'd like to open up for just a couple of questions if anyone has one, please.
It's just killing me.
Yes.
So going back to the garage where the files.
Yes, the Burgert collection. Yes.
So who and how, in a short response, were those images photoshopped to repair?
Good. The question is, with those file cabinets full of Burgert photos, mostly negatives, what happened with those and how were they photoshopped? They weren't. What they did was, when the library got that collection, they got on it and they started looking through it and they found the ones that were in the worst shape and they started reproducing those. They send them somewhere for conservatorship so that they can do whatever they can with the negatives and then print them. And those are now, I've seen them officially, they are now in a refrigerator, which is where that stuff needs to stay. So that's how it happened. I mean, there's old glass negatives, and you'll see prints online. It's got a crack running right through it because the negative was cracked. They do not Photoshop those. The way you see it is the way it is today. And let me throw my little bit of idea about that. If you're going to use these images in any way, I'm going to ask you to consider not Photoshopping them, not turning them into what you want them to be, unless there's a commercial purpose or something to do that. Celebrate the art. Honor the artist. And it's okay to take some dings and stuff out of it. It's okay to change the contrast. But what I see over and over online is people will put this beautiful Burgert photo up, no credit whatsoever. And it says right there online, if you're going to use this, please give credit to the library. What's the hard part about that? Okay, I'll stop. I'm going to get all started on that. Please, yes.
This is probably not appropriate, but I'm going to ask.
Don't be inappropriate, but please.
No, I know that you're, there's a fundraising to try to, you've made some matching, the library has it.
Yes.
How much more do you need to raise right now? And
That-
maybe people can
That's
get
so
involved.
appropriate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, on the back of these cards, you can scan that little thing if you use QR codes, and you can scan and go to the site. And the answer is, I didn't recognize William Lamartin, by the way. This guy took us over the top for our first level. Thank you so much for, man, what a fantastic, yeah, seriously. We were able to get to a point of where it looks like we're going to move towards digitization, but unfortunately that's not the end of the expense, because once we get those things digitized, and I don't know that we're fully there yet, but it's going to happen. I promise you it's going to happen. Then we're talking about having an exhibit. Well, printing photographs is expensive, and so hopefully what will be, if we have any excess, what we're going to do with that is to be able to print and have a wonderful exhibit of some of Skip's work. And that's going to happen too if I have anything to say with it. And you're all invited for free. If I have anything to say about it, I'll pay your admission on it. Any other questions? Please, please.
Elvis performed at Fort Homer Hesterly Armory.
He did. He did. The comment was that Elvis performed at Fort Homer Hesterly Armory, and that's probably when he was in town when that shot was taken. Any other thoughts or comments?
Well, and I think we're about, I've heard we're around $800 off, so we're getting very close. So that's what I've heard, but I can't confirm that.
And need I say that every little bit helps? I mean, if you got that $10 you want to throw in, you'll be part of Tampa history, and I really believe that we collectively can make this happen. We're going to take it over the top. think 50 years from now, think your kids and grandkids will be able to look back and see what Tampa was made of. It just doesn't get any cooler than that, at least in Chip's world. Please.
Do you have to be a member of the library to view these?
The question is, do you need to be a member of the library to view these? And I would defer to Abby. It's free.
Public resource, so yeah, it's open to everyone.
And as far as the Tampa Public Library is concerned, listen, you can get a library card. So is that necessary to view the collection?
No, you don't need a library card to view it. See the catalog on our website.
Cool.
People stop by from out of town all the time. They stop by and curious. You don't need a library card to view it.
Awesome.
I'd also remind you that the USF libraries have about, I think, 2,000 Burgerts. So we have some Burgerts too.
Are Burgert's online?
Yes.
The folks at the Hillsborough County Library, oh my gosh, the 4th floor, they are so helpful. I mean, they want to help. They want to help you trace your family, genealogy, whatever it is, help you with history. They want to, and they have been just a godsend in making all this history happen. So thank you guys, and thanks so much to USF for having the collection, being able to make this collection come together and get it digitized, for organizing that. We have a whole crew of folks there, some of whom are here today, that help make this happen. This isn't a one-trick pony. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen for this to happen, and Andy and his team have been just a blessing to have and to help make that happen. Please.
This was more, I knew it would be special, but it's really more than incredible. And the most important thing I think that you said was that the reason it's special, the reason that we're so quiet, this is the quietest audience I think I've ever been a part of, is because we feel it.
Yep.
You know, whether it's a grandparent, great-grandparent,
Right.
whatever it is,
Right.
but you did that. You've done that, and you keep doing it, and that's why these have to be purchased, because you have to be alone in a little corner of your home and go through each.
Ladies and gentlemen, my agent. Checks in the mail. I'm the conduit. I'm the conduit, but I didn't take these photos. Well, I took the new ones, but it's a love, it's a passion, and I so appreciate you guys being here. Thank you all for your continued interest. Stay tuned, and hope to see you really sometime in the near future.